All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, I think I'm going to be doing my first actual live reaction video. Like, haven't seen the video yet. Type reaction. See how it goes. We're going to be reacting to something that's actually something I've been keeping close eye on in World of Warcraft for many, many years as an economist, and that is basically what Staysafe and I suppose the rest of the community has to say about like gold farming in general, the level 50 one boost. He's Staysafe here is going to be complaining about how it's like a license to print money or something. I'm kind of curious, but anyways, my background information is played World of Warcraft for I guess like 16 years at this point, basically since it came out. And previous to that, played a lot of Diablo 2. Diablo 2 had a lot of MMO market type stuff. Played a lot of EVE Online, and I actually have degrees in socio-political and economic philosophy. All right, like that is theoretically what I do for a living. Although, as you know, if you have degrees in socio-economic political philosophy, you don't really make money doing that. So, bit of a meme there. But I am extremely well versed on economics, and economics in video games in the digital space has always been something I've been very interested in studying over the years. So I'm very curious to see what Staysafe has to say. There is a almost 100% chance that he's going to get something wrong. Economists, even if you're at like the top of your game as an economist, you usually have like an 20% failure rate. So if you're just not an economist by trade, holy shit. So this ought to be fun to watch. But anyways, let's watch the video first, and hopefully I won't. I'll try to hold off until the end to pause and really get into what I see happening with the whole botting thing. Played a lot of Diablo 2, saw a lot of the botting stuff. But Diablo 2 is more of a PvE game, like a single player game, than a massive MMO. So, anyways, let's play.
I want to start this video by saying that I am very strongly against gold buying in Classic WoW, and I seriously advise against it. That being said, ignoring the fact that gold buying has become a big part of many people's classic gameplay would be ignoring a very serious issue. At the moment, on the largest Alliance server in the world, you can buy 1,000 gold on the Alliance for $41.95 USD. Not really very expensive when you think about it.
That's a lot of money.
Keep that number in mind as we move forward. Now, recently at BlizzConline,
that's like $50 for 10 hours of gold farming time. That's like if you're making like 100 gold an hour. If you're like dog shit at making gold, right? 100 gold an hour. This is 10 hours of your playtime. If you're a little bit better at making gold in World of Warcraft, that would be more like what is it? A 150. 10 divided by like 150, we'll say like 7 hours of game time. Is that about right? Yeah, 7 hours. So, yeah, this is priced about right, according to my economic theory on MMO. So $50 for 7 hours of your time is about right. Yeah, okay, let's continue.
About it.
I also think that only about 20% of the player base actually buys gold in World of Warcraft. But maybe he disagrees or has some data that says differently.
Keep that number in mind as we move forward. Now, recently at BlizzConline, Blizzard announced that in Classic TBC, you'll be able to purchase a level 58 boost once per WoW account, though if you wanted, there's nothing stopping you from making multiple WoW accounts and purchasing multiple level 58 boosts. Now, though Blizzard didn't give a firm price for each 58 boost, I think a safe guess would be around $60, which is the current price of a level boost in Shadowlands. Now, what would be the purpose of making multiple WoW accounts and buying a boost on each one? Well, to print gold at a dollar price that's cheaper than the gold selling sites currently are. Let me explain how. In TBC, every level 60 character can pick up tailoring and pump out one Primal Moon Cloth, one Spell Cloth, and one Shadowweave Cloth every 4 days. And you can also specialize in one of these cloth types to make 2 rather than 1. So every 4 days, you're actually making 4 cloth in total. These different cloth types are hugely desirable, especially in early TBC, because pretty much every healer and caster DPS will need these cloths to make their best in slot gear sets, such as the Frozen Shadowweave set for Warlocks. Now, I played a lot of TBC back in the day, and I've also referenced a few current TBC private servers, and each cloth you can craft typically yields around a 40 gold profit margin after you subtract
We created Dungeon Alchemist,
Yes,
an AI-powered map-making application that allows you to make awesome-looking maps with just...
Yes, fuck off.
Extract out the materials you need to craft the cloth in the first place, such as some various primals you could use. This means that every 4 days, you're making 160 gold, or every 28 days, to make the math simple, let's call this a month. First place, a profit margin after...
Whoa, shut the fuck
I
up.
played a lot of TBC back in the day, and I've also referenced a few current
Okay.
TBC private servers, and each cloth you can craft typically yields around a 40 gold profit margin after you subtract out the materials you need to craft the cloth in the first place, such as some various primals you could use. This means that every 4 days, you're making...
That's on private servers, though, and the issue with that is on private servers, they are kind of psychotic about killing bots. Like, they're very, very anti-bot, and the GMs are really good at killing bots. So he's talking about market economy under private server conditions, which means no botting, which means it'll be much rarer to see these materials. But we can get into more economic stuff later. But it's really interesting to watch him. Hopefully he addresses the problem that he's throwing non-botting numbers out right now.
160 gold, or every 28 days, to make the math simple, let's call this a month, you're making 1,120 gold on average. So in essence, you just spend $75 USD, the $60 boost, plus the $15 for the 1 month of WoW subscription to make 1,120 gold. While you could just alternatively go to a third-party gold site and buy 1,000 gold for $41.95. So at the moment, it would be better just to go to the gold site straight up and buy the gold.
Dude, your math is dog shit right now. For a variety of reasons. Hopefully you address this.
But keep in mind, most of your investment was for the $60 boost, so as time goes on, this deal gets a lot better for you. Let's break it down.
Oh, man.
At the 3-month mark, your dollar investment would be $105, and you would have made 3,360 gold.
Are we still on with this? I mean, are you going to address the fact that you're using classic WoW gold farming prices for literally, because it's like, oh, you bought, it's going to change in TBC, right? So it's going to be $50 for like 3,000 gold in TBC, to give you an example. Just because it's going to be a lot easier for level 70s to go bots to go run around and farm a metric shit ton of gold, if that makes any sense. So it's like, I don't know what the okay, let's roll with it. Your math is already scuffed, but sure, why not? Let's not address it.
Gold. And at the 6-month mark, you'd have spent $150 USD and made 6,720 gold. Now, to compare that to the third-party gold sites, you'd have to spend $219.30 to get just 6,000 gold. In other words, you'd have to spend 46% more USD to get 12% gold less. And the profit margin only gets crazier and crazier the longer you do this. And keep in mind, we're only talking about doing this so far on one account. Now, third-party gold prices will fluctuate. They're going to go up and down, as will the price of the cloth crafts in-game. But as you can see, there is a lot of wiggle room for profit here. And my big point with this video is that these 58 boosts are economically devastating for classic TBC.
Okay.
The return on investment is absolutely insane and rewards swiping your credit card to a disgusting degree. This is objectively pay to win, these level 58 boosts.
Wow.
Now, I want to also mention quickly that I keep my ear to the ground as far as the classic WoW community goes, and I can already tell you guys, there are a lot of people planning on dropping tons of money in real life to build a literal army of level 60 tailoring alts. Now, like I said earlier, in early TBC especially, the demand for these various cloth types will be through the roof. So if down the road these tailoring alts become less profitable, you can just stop paying the sub on the...
Fuck off.
We created Dungeon Alchemist, an AI-powered map-making application that allows you to make awesome-looking...
Turned on the monetization.
You'll already have gotten your value back after just a few months anyway. Worst case scenario. So there's pretty much nothing to lose as far as these go.
Crap.
It's insane.
Okay, so the reason why I'm sighing and shit over here is I'm just like, your math is incredibly disingenuous, and your economic logic and reasoning, Staysafe's economic logic and reasoning here is dog shit. But we're gonna finish the video and get into it. So this is I was expecting it to be a little bad. I wasn't expecting it to be like I never took an economic class in my life bad. Holy shit.
Now, more than any other video of mine, guys, I really want you guys to help me out and comment, upvote, subscribe to level up to level 58 on their own. They should re-implement the Recruiter Friend system, which was originally added in late TBC and offered substantial XP boosts while actually playing the game with your friend that recruited you. Or, as far as Blizzard is concerned, if the concern is just making money, fuck the player experience, just start selling original TCG rewards like the Tabards or Spectral Tigers on an in-game shop. Literally anything other than 58 boosts. They're so insanely damaging to this game.
Are we done talking about it?
Anyway, guys, that's my rant. If you agree and want Blizzard to change something about this, let me see a hashtag #StopTheBoost in the comments section. Thank you guys for watching. Let's hope something changes with this. And as always,
you have 5 minutes
safe.
out of 8 minutes? What the fuck? Stop the boost. Stop the boost. Stop the boost. Stop the boost. Stop the... What the fuck is this video? Man, fuck off, stay safe. This is dog shit. All right, it's economic talk time. Holy crap. All right. So first off, let's address his math problem. He's assuming that he does say third-party numbers will fluctuate, but he's assuming that gold farming rates. Let's go back to what he's got down here, just so I don't have to write it anywhere. Currently, you can buy yada yada for like metric gold an hour. All right, pause.
Cents US
fast here. I think I got another video rolling on the side. We're gonna cancel that. Boom. Okay, so he's assuming this number will stay the same from Classic World of Warcraft to TBC. We can already assume that botters are, they have all their characters level 60, right? So if they have an account, they've probably got like 9 characters on that account, and they're all level 60 already, right? So once they go into TBC, it's not going to be 9 level 60s still farming gold in Azeroth with their level 60 gear, which would literally generate about these numbers. They're going to have 9 level 70s per account that they're paying a monthly subscription for that are bots farming gold, and they're going to be way more effective at it, about like twice as effective at it, right? So at a minimum, we can assume that this number is going to go up to about 2,000 gold for 50 USD, and that basically throws his math way off on this one, to be perfectly honest with you. Where is the math? Okay, so the math is basically over here. So you have to factor in the increased raw gold farming power of the bots, not to mention the increased raw gold farming power of the player community, and the bots that they have running around picking up herbs and shit to siphon gold off of the player community, who's basically what I'm trying to say is if the average Joe in Classic World of Warcraft can make 100 gold an hour, like that's just the norm, right? In TBC, the average Joe is going to be making about 200 gold an hour, and therefore these numbers are basically going to double. We can talk about that in a bit. So he's talking about in a month for $150, you're getting about 3,000 gold, right? So each of his characters was getting about 3,000 gold or 1,000 gold for 15 USD. Or you'd have to spend like $150. Well, in TBC, you're going to be spending $50 for about 2,000 gold, right? Like, already, it's probably going to be more like 3,000 gold, to be perfectly honest, but we'll say 2,000. You're spending about 50 USD for 2,000 gold, which means if you spent this $150 in gold, you'd actually get a gold increase, and you wouldn't have to waste your time. Prices will also fluctuate drastically on the items here, because he's showing you right now that just like Fellcloth in Classic World of Warcraft, if you don't know how I make my gold in Classic World of Warcraft, is I've got literally like, I have my Pally time, and then I have like 6 level 35 Hunter alts. And the Hunter alts are just constantly churning out Fellcloth and what else do I primarily use them for? Like Arcanite bars, that kind of a thing. And you can't do this indefinitely. You just can't print money because there's just not enough Fellcloth on the market for you to really to super profit from that, and there's not enough arcane crystals for you to turn into arcanite bars. The exact same thing is going to happen with our so-called army of bots, right? So disingenuous math number 1 on this video was an assumption that they're not going to be level 70 farmers, aka they're going to be making about Rather than making 300 gold an hour as a bot, they're going to be making like 600 gold an hour now as a bot, assuming they're still doing like ZG runs or some shit like that. Or Strat Undead. They were doing Strat Undead like, 2-man, 3-man bot teams. Now they'll be going in as like a single man bot team. In fact, they're probably leveling up 1,000,000 paladins right now just for that purpose. Or they're leveling up a bunch of paladins to go with their mage team, and their bot farming team will be an AoE class like a mage. Well, mages have their AoE nerfed. So yeah, maybe they're just leveling up a bunch of fucking paladins now. Jesus. The point is, let's say there are, let's say a server can only produce so much of these materials in a given hour. That's going to make it really expensive. It's going to cut into your profit margins, is what I'm saying. So his profit margins are set for private server profit margins, and private server profit margins do not have a botting crew, which in theory should make this worse, right? Because the bots can be running around and picking up and selling lots and lots of motes of fire. But the only reason that they would be, I think this is primal fire. The only reason that they would be picking up motes and then making primals and whatever the fuck this is, again, this is the equivalent of like Fellcloth and Arcanite bars is what you're looking at right here for these materials. The only reason that they would be running around picking those up is if it was profitable for them to do so, even factoring in what Staysafe is trying to factor in, which is people trying to print money. If it hurt them to farm up these with their armies of bots, then they would not do it, right? So let's say Staysafe is 100% correct on his math, okay? And the gold farmers are still going to be selling 1,000 gold for $50, and there's going to be like an army of Shadowcloth crafters and blah, 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 blah. The botters will not farm these materials and put them on the market. Like, they literally will not do it because all it gives them is in-game gold. It doesn't actually allow them to sell you gold for money in real life. So they're not going to feed their competitive industry, if that makes any sense, right? Because they can't make money. For them to go out and use their bots to farm these materials and then put them on the auction house in exchange for gold would not help them to sell people gold, right? So they just wouldn't do that unless the pricing was right. And so that means that if the pricing is right, then the army of bots will actually fuel this army of clothies. But that just means that the clothies aren't actually getting a good deal, if that makes any sense. Like, it'll be them making 3,000 gold a month, and it'll be them selling 4,000 gold for like $50, right? Like, that'll be the exchange that they would actually send their army of bots out to go get these materials. Not sure you can actually have an army of bots to easily pick up these materials. I'm not entirely sure on that. Like, can you do instances? But that has to do more with classic WoW economy. Okay, so let's get into how economics actually works in video games, because Staysafe is literally talking out his ass. So it's one thing to talk out your ass for not knowing economics. I can totally forgive that, right? It'd be like me, like I made a video recently on why I thought Seal of Blood wouldn't be a thing. And when I started talking about raiding environments, I got crushed because I don't know anything about raiding. So I'm going to get absolutely shit on there. Completely understandable, but if you're just throwing disingenuous math at me like some kind of fucking retard, I'm going to bitch slap you down. So prepare for a little bit of bitch slapping here. Okay. So, how things work in video games, economics, unlike real life economics, is all centered around how much money you can make per hour, if that makes any sense. So, for example, let's say the average player in World of Warcraft can make like 100 gold an hour, okay? Or you can go do Dire Maul East jump runs for, okay, yeah. Let me pull up a paint here, and we'll get to this. Okay, there's someplace I can type. Oh, holy crap, why is it on 72? 24. All right, let's say that the average Joe an hour can make 100 gold an hour, /HR. All right. And then you, as a player, can always go into like Maradon or ZG and make like 150 gold /hour, right? You're a little bit more of you're a better gold farmer. You're a little bit more of a pimp, right? You got yourself a mage. You can go do that shit. Let's say you're doing a Dire Maul East jump run, and you're getting 2 arcane crystals. Crystal? There we go. Jesus. /hour. Okay. These are 2 options. So this first one is this is Joe. And then over here we got you. Okay. Whether or not you're doing arcane jump or Dire Maul East jump runs for 2 arcane crystals an hour, like let's say that's the only thing you're getting profit out of is the 2 arcane crystals an hour, and we're not looking at anything else. Okay. Under what market conditions would you be doing these jump runs over like any other farm you could do for like 150 gold an hour? First off, fucking hell. First off, what are we expecting Arcanite crystals to be going for on this server under these market conditions? And the answer is that the Arcanite crystals on the auction house, you can literally pinpoint what the price of an Arcanite crystal is on the auction house based purely upon how much gold per hour the average Joe can make. So the answer is that Arcanite crystals in the auction house are probably selling for 55 gold on this server. This has always been my theory in World of Warcraft auction housing since forever, and it always tends to hold up. No matter what expansion I'm looking at, no matter what the botting conditions are, this always holds up. And the reason for this is because your average, if it was more than this, right? Like if it was like 60 gold an hour, right? So what this is telling the average Joes is that they can stop doing whatever the fuck gold farming run that they're getting 100 gold on and go do jump runs for like 120 gold an hour, like on average, right? So this is incentivizing the average Joes to stop doing whatever shitty gold farming that they're currently doing and go do jump runs. And when they do the jump runs, they're going to end up selling it for like, 55 gold, 60 gold, because they at least at a minimum have to be making a 100 gold an hour. Otherwise, they would just go make 100 gold an hour. And the same thing happens for you here. Under these market conditions, you would not be doing jump runs because you would look at them because it's not worth your time. You might as well go do Maradon for 150 gold, or you might as well go do Boost for like 150 gold, or you might as well go do something else for 150 gold an hour as opposed to 2 arcane crystals an hour, which any average Joe can fucking do. And the market pricing, of course, is going to be 55 gold an hour. So unless you're just bored and you want a change of scenery and you don't mind the loss of gold per hour, there's no fucking way that you, as a player who can make 150 gold, would be doing the Arcanite bar jump run. There's also no way in the world that the Arcanite bars would be priced over 55 gold, because you're only getting like 2 an hour. So it'd be like, I sell it for 55, the auction house hits me up for like 10% of that, and I'm literally making 100 gold an hour, whether or not I'm doing Dire Maul East jump runs, or I'm doing any other fucking thing as an average Joe. Like that is what the average Joe is looking at. The reason why, so he'd be doing Dire Maul East jump runs just because it's basically a change of scenery, okay? So, literally how you have to look at the pricing of anything in Classic World of Warcraft is this. You're trading an hour of your gameplay time for an hour of somebody else's gameplay time, right? So, for example, let's say you were, like any 2 herbs. Like, let's say you could get 2 stacks of herb /hour, like any herb in the game, as long as it's an in-demand herb. So we're talking dream foil or silver sausages or Grom's blood or blind weed or 2 stacks of any herb an hour. And no matter how hard you try, you can't get more than 2 stacks an hour. Well, what are we expecting the market prices, the auction house prices, to be for those 2 stacks of herbs that you're able to get per hour? Pretty much, no matter what no matter what you're doing. The answer is that it's going to be literally how much gold the average Joe can make. It's going to be, well, the average Joe is making 100 gold for an hour, therefore these stacks of herbs are probably selling for about 55 gold a stack, right? It's literally the same as the arcane crystals. So prices are usually, they're dictated not by the small group of people who can make more gold than the average Joe. It's dictated by the average Joe, because when you go to the auction house, you're selling 80% of the time to the average Joe, right? Okay, and then we talk about market forces, and this is also true for the botters. So the botters might be making like 300 gold an hour, right? So 150, and then we want a 300 for the bot. So let's say the bots are just kind of nuts, and they're making 300 gold an hour, okay? And they pick up two. They're getting their options are to go either farm 2 arcane bars an hour, or to pick up 2 stacks of herb an hour, or to just go make 300 gold an hour, like somewhere, right? They might do all 3. But the simple fact of the matter is they're far better off just going and getting their gold per hour, because even if they went and they picked up the herbs and they picked up the arcane materials and they picked up the motes of fire or the primal fires, and you don't pick up primal fires, you make primal fires. They go get the motes of fire, they go get the motes of shadow in TBC. They can't sell to the 150 person crowd on the auction house. They can't even sell to other botters. The only people they can sell to are the fucking average Joes, which means they're not really going to be doing Dire Mall East jump runs under this equation if they can go make 300 or even like 150 gold an hour. If the bots can go make 150 raw gold an hour somewhere, they're not going to be doing jump runs for arcane crystals. They're not going to be farming stacks of herbs every hour, because when they go to the auction house, they can't sell to the other pumpers. They can only sell to the fucking average Joes, which means it's not worth their botting time to literally go and farm these materials. They're far better off going and picking up raw gold. Okay? You follow me on this? Okay, so what does this mean? Well, in classic World of Warcraft, and we saw this on, keep in mind, Staysafe was on Faralina, I was on Faralina as well. We saw this in classic WoW before Dire Mall East jump runs came out. Before Dire Mall East jump runs came out, there wasn't an instance content that gave you thorium, to my knowledge. There was no instant content whatsoever that gave you thorium. And the prices on a bar of thorium, and God help you if you were trying to buy an Arcanite crystal in like phase 1, right, were exorbitant because of issues of supply and demand. Everybody needed Arcanite bars. Everybody needed Arcanite crystals. There was no instanced content for that, just like there's no instant content for, say, Black Lotuses, right? This allows botters to potentially form monopolies on certain things, right? So now what the botters can do, it makes the prices for limited resources that everybody needs, again, supply and demand, right? Very exorbitant. There we go. Which means that not only are the bots like camping rich thorium vein spawn locations, the botters, the player base is camping rich thorium vein spawning locations. This is what was back in phase 1, right? And how do I explain this? It's like, It's even when you look at an economic environment like that, where there is no instant content, there is no instanced content for a resource that the player community desperately needs. What ends up happening, where it really it both favors the botters and it punishes the botters, right? is that kind of a scenario? You're still only able to sell 1 hour of your labor for an hour of another person's time. So for the average Joe. So if you're like, because this is what I did in phase 1, sometimes when I was bored, I would go watch a movie and I would literally have like the respawn timers on like 2 thorium nodes, right? And I was getting maybe like 3 rich thorium nodes in my pocket every hour, because there was competition going around on the server. But it was just an easy way to make gold and basically chill. and some PvP in there as well. I still could not trade an hour of my time for any more than what the average Joe can make in his amount of time. So on our theoretical server, if the average Joe is still making 100 gold an hour, I'm only able to trade 3 rich thorium nodes, because that's how many I could get per hour, for about 100 gold in total, because, again, you're trading an hour of your time for an hour of the average Joe's gold farming time. Once Direball East Jump Runs came out, and now you're getting like 10 rich thorium nodes in your pocket every hour, you're still only able to trade the contents of 10 rich thorium nodes, the average content of 10 rich thorium nodes per hour, for 100 fucking gold an hour, which is the average Joe. This is just how economics works in fucking video games, because if you go to the auction house, it's how it works if you're forced to go to the auction house. If you're not forced to go to the auction house, then however much gold you're able to make from vendor trashing items is just how much gold you end up making from vendor trashing items. Naturally, when you go do instant content as a botter, right, you're going to have a mix of everything that you're vendoring and then additional stuff that ends up going on the auction house. I guess that works for players too, even if you're not doing some botting shit. All right, so now we need to talk about the effects of competition. Another good example would be like Devil Sore Mafia leather. Okay, so I just gave an example of the rich thorium example in phase 1, which in theory is just like the Devil Sore leather issue, right? There's no instance content for Devil Sore leather. Everybody needs it. Blah 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 blah. Just like the thorium ore, there was no instant content for rich thorium ore. Everybody needed rich thorium ore, the contents thereof, and it was just interesting. But because the rich thorium ore was in a massive state of competition, everybody was camping rich thorium ore spawn locations. The botters weren't even trying to compete with us unless it was like some really isolated location out in the middle of nowhere. I didn't see too many botters going for the rich thorium ores. If they did, they would log in, log out, log in, log out. They were usually players. But Lord knows that's what I was doing. Okay, so you could say that theoretically you could generate there's certain things in the open world that do not spawn in instant content, therefore you can theoretically make a monopoly on them. And then you no longer have to trade an hour of your farm time for an hour of the average Joe's farm time on the auction house. A key example of this would be the Devil Sore leather Mafia that used to exist on the private servers. There is no instant content for Devil Sore Mafia. It is something that many classes actually need, and it is in a small enough location that if you're pimp enough with a crew of PvPers, you can theoretically generate a monopoly on that. It would be like if Rich Thorium Vein or Black Lotus, this is Black Lotus, could be monopolized, kind of a scenario. In that case, if you end up getting an actual monopoly on a resource that everybody needs, you no longer have to pay Joe, the average Joe. The auction house price is not going to be an equation of how much of this resource were you able to generate in an hour. You're going to end up paying how much gold can the average player make an hour, and literally you're going to be trading however much of that resource you're able to generate in an hour for a little bit more than however much gold the average Joe can make in an hour. What it ends up being is you can charge pretty much whatever you want and whatever people are willing to pay you. So if you're able to make, let's say, 10 Devil Sore leather an hour, okay? This means that, since we're subject to the average Joe gold farming rule on the auction house, we're going to be selling Devil Sore leather for about 10 gold a pop. Because I can get 10 an hour, the average Joe can make 100 gold an hour. We're trading 1 hour of my farm time for 1 hour of the average Joe's farm time. If we have a monopoly on it, though, that we don't have to deal with any competition on the auction house, and you can see this on the auction house, right? When you go and you get your arcane crystals, or you get your stacks of herb, or you get your Devil Sore leather, or whatever the fuck it is that you're doing, and then you make your way to the auction house and you try to sell it, you're always getting constantly underbid by people, right? So you might want to be selling it for like 100 gold an herb stack. But competition is going to smash you into the dirt, and demand basically force you to sell it for like 55 gold a stack. And when you actually do the math of why the market one is because you're suffering the effects of competition. Competition will not let you sell for an exorbitant price because people will just keep undercutting you. And then the price the market usually settles on is literally an hour of your time traded for an hour of the average Joe's time. If you have a monopoly on that Devil's Store leather, then you can start charging like 300 gold for a piece of Devil's Store leather, or like 50 gold for a piece of Devil's Store leather. So it's like you get the point, right? Because you're not going to be subject to competition. So then you have to ask yourself, under what conditions are the botters actually being subject to the forces of competition? Because the botters are subject to the forces of competition. You might think that they have a monopoly on, say, Black Lotuses, because at any point in time, there's an army of bots that are scooping up all the Black Lotuses, and players never ever get to see a Black Lotus. The problem is, there's like 10 different websites of gold sellers online with their bots out, all trying to scoop up those Black Lotuses. Which means when they finally go to the auction house and they try to sell their Black Lotuses kind of a thing, they probably have some weird market price on it as well. So for example, if Blizzard... Here's my theory, okay? If Blizzard completely obliterated the bots overnight, like if they had like some tests or some theoretical test server where they're absolutely not letting bots on whatsoever, and then they're having the player base just run around on the server, it wouldn't actually change the pricing of the Black Lotuses at all. If anything, Black Lotus prices might be a little bit more expensive on, say, like Faralina. And the reason for this is because they're a very limited resource. You cannot do instance content for them, and the auction house pricing for them is literally going to be, if I do nothing for the next like 10 hours, but try to get my hands on Black Lotus, and I'm able to pick up, like, let's say one Black Lotus an hour, and the average Joe can make 100 gold an hour. I'm still subject to the market forces prices of competition from everyone else that's gathering Black Lotuses on the hour, every hour. This means that your Black Lotus prices are going to be like 200, like 120 gold, because I want to make more money than doing an average Joe farm, but you get the point. You're still going to be subject to the law of how much gold the average Joe can make. Supply and demand will change this. Like Black Lotus prices are going up significantly from Naxxramas, because suddenly you need a lot of the server's demand for Black Lotus has increased significantly. But the supply of Black Lotus, of course, has not increased significantly. Therefore, you can start trading them a little bit better, if that makes sense. So you might be able to only get a single Black Lotus an hour, but you can now start demanding of the average Joe 2 hours of his farm time in exchange for like 1 hour gold. So it's a little bit subject to different phenomena. One of the major phenomena that World of Warcraft botting and gold farming is subject to is whether or not instant content exists for you to get your hand on that resource, right? So for example, Fellcloth. There's almost no instant content that exists that lets you get your hands on good quantities of Fellcloth. It's not that it doesn't exist, right? Like Dire Maul East jump runs and the demons that you'll find in there will give you Fellcloth, but it's not like a massive Fellcloth farm, if that makes any sense. You're not going to get any more Fellcloth doing the instant content than if you were just kind of farming the mobs out in the world. Although if an industry popped up, it's just weird. There's a lot of factors involved there. So, for example, moving into TBC, let's say that there was a resource like Mote of Shadow that you could turn into Primal Shadow that you cannot get anywhere. There's no instant content for you to pick up Motes of Shadow, which I don't really think that is. I think you can go into like Mana Tombs and pick up Motes of Shadow. Pretty sure. So, whatever. But if there's a resource that everybody needs, and there's no instant content that the bots or the player bases can generate massive amounts of this resource, when they stick like 50,000 people on one server, like what happened in Phase 1, right? 50,000 people on one server in Faralina. We all need thorium bars, and like literally we all need it because we need to be engineering for Phase 2. We all need thorium bars. We all need dense stone. We all need arcanite bars for a variety of reasons. There's no instant content for us. The market price on a thorium bar was insane. It didn't fix itself until Dire Maul East came out, and we finally had a instant content where you could go pick up thorium bars. Thank God. How do I explain this? The botters want to do one of two things, right? They either want to find a really nice raw gold farm, or they want to get their hands on a resource that is very, very rare and very, very coveted, preferably from like instant content, if that makes any sense. And if there is any instanced content, damn, that's a hard word to say, instanced content that has a rare, like the thorium bars, for example, then the player base will get on that as well. So it's not really profitable for the bots to start botting thorium bars specifically. They're better off trying to find like raw gold farms, because the moment the botters can't really get involved with this resource and hour thing, because they're still subject to the laws of the average Joe per hour, if that makes any sense. So if they try to play by the auction house's rules, a botter, right? He's still going to be subject to the law of the average Joe. If he's trying to sell, so what they're trying to do is they're trying to find materials in the world that they sell to the average Joe for gold, and then they're supposed to turn around and try to give the best price possible online for gold to other human beings, if that makes any sense. So it's like the botters are in competition with other botters. Or you shouldn't call them botters. You should call them like online gold sellers are in competition with other online gold sellers. And what they want to do is they want to make as much gold as possible, as cheaply as possible, because they are paying these subscription fees, so that they can then turn around and give the best deal possible to that small percentage of people, like 20% of the player base, who is actually going and buying gold online. All right? So they don't want to be the gold seller online selling gold for 1,000 gold for $50. They want to be the guy who can sell 12,000 gold for $50. That way they're beating out all their competition, and they're just making more money. They're in competition for the very limited number of real-world money exchange for gold online transactions, right? So therefore, the way they win that battle against their competition is they just give the best deal possible, which means they're not going to be fucking around too much with the auction house unless it is super profitable for them. Them screwing around with the auction house and being subject to the law of the average the average Joe per hour only comes as a side effect of just making raw gold per hour. So they might do Dire Maul East runs for other reasons, or they might do like Strat Undead is really popular for them apparently, or maybe Strat Live, and they just happen to pick up like some rare mats in the instances, like what is it? The orbs. I forget what they're actually called. Is it like Orb of Righteousness? There we go. And damn. Right. So if the botters are putting stuff on the auction house, it's usually a side effect of them trying to get the best gold per hour out of their bots. Like whatever they're doing to get the best raw gold per hour will sometimes generate items that need to go on the auction house. But the moment they have any of these items that need to go on the auction house, they're going to be subject to the law of the average Joe per hour, which is not usually ideal for them. Which is why that this number over here really fascinated me, and I said made complete sense for classic World of Warcraft. So let's bounce over here. So what they're selling, they're a little bit over $40, right? They're selling 1,000 gold for $40. So what they're basically telling people is we can actually try to figure out how we can actually figure out from these numbers how much gold per hour their average bot crew is making, because they want to give the human player a little bit of a better deal, but not a much better deal than the average Joe can farm in an hour, if that makes sense. So, anyways, on Farolina, I'm fairly convinced that the average Joe per hour's gold level income is around about 100 gold. I keep looking at prices and how much stacks of herbs you can farm in a given hour, how many arcanite crystals you can farm in a given hour, what they're selling for on the server, and it gives me a very good idea of what the average gold, what the community thinks the average gold income in an hour is for the average Joe. So, if the average gold per income for the average Joe on, say, fairly, this is on Pagel though, which it's probably a little bit, I don't know, it's probably the same actually. We'll say it's 100 gold an hour, okay? So you're able to make 100 gold an hour as an average Joe. This means that, what the fuck? Okay, wrong button. You're willing to pay, how much real world currency are you willing to pay in order to make gold? So you go to your job, like your minimum wage job, right? And you might work, let's say you, the average American, I think Pagel's an American server. Let's say the average American is working, and he'll work for about 5 hours to make 40 USD that he can then throw away on something, right? And that's being pretty generous. So it's probably more like I work for like 6 hours, and I might make like 40 American dollars after taxes that I can then throw away. This means that the average, if they're offering me 1,000 gold for $40 worth of my real world currency, this is the equivalent of offering me, telling me as the average Joe that I can either go and farm gold for 10 hours, or I can go and work my real world job for like 6 hours in exchange for this 1,000 gold. And what that immediately tells me is that the average amount of gold that these botters are able to make per hour is about 150. Because if they were able to make like 200 gold an hour, then it wouldn't be them asking me for, it wouldn't be 10 hours of my gold farm time for $6 of my real world money. This number would be closer to like 1,400 gold, for example, for $40, because they want to beat out all their competition, right? Does that make any sense? They want to be the highest number here for the lowest number over here. That's what the gold farmers are looking for. And they want to give a good deal. So what they literally want to say is they want to, how do I put this? They could not offer this 1,000 gold to me for $100. Like, they couldn't do that, because at that point, not even $100. Like, how much money do I make in 10 hours working? Maybe like $60. So let's say you make $60 in 10 hours of working your real job, like after taxes, and they're offering you they're literally saying, work your real life job for an hour and we'll give you 100 gold, or farm for an hour in classic World of Warcraft, presumably having some fun, and we'll also give you 100 gold. They can't make that deal. It has to be a better deal than what the average Joe can make farming, and they're going to try to give you the best deal possible. So if the gold farmers are making 200 gold an hour, this is telling me that they're making about 150 gold an hour. If they were able to make 200 gold an hour, then this number would be more closer to like 1,400 gold, and what they're basically saying is, hey, you can either farm gold for 14 hours in Classic WoW as an average fucking Joe, or you can work your real-life job for about 6 hours and hand that over to us rather than farming your gold rather than farming gold in Classic WoW for 14 hours, which is a good deal, right? Okay. Whew. What do I want to say here? La 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 la. You want to think that your botters are engaging in. You want to think that they're fucking up your auction house prices. The truth is, they're not fucking up your auction house prices. They're going for just raw gold an hour. Every time they put something on the auction house, they're subject to the law of the average Joe, because every time I put anything on the auction house, I'm subject to the law of the average Joe. Every time I'm buying something off the auction house, I have the laws of the average Joe is working in my favor, right? Which is why it's really important to try to find gold farming techniques in Classic World of Warcraft that are giving you better than the average Joe an hour. So when it's like, hey, I can go do mage farm runs for 300 gold an hour in ZG, and the average Joe is doing like 100 gold an hour, you're going to have some serious power on the auction house. Does that make sense? Because you're making 3 times more than the average Joe doing the ZG farm than you are than every other average Joe is, right? And the law of the average Joe in the auction house is always going to be 1 hour of my. God damn it! Do I have to like write down the law? Do I have to like make a law of World of Warcraft here, like the average Joe law? The economic law of World of Warcraft is bleh. So what it basically means is, if the average Joe in World of Warcraft can make X amount of gold in an hour, and then the auction house price for an hour of doing anything will be X. Okay, like that is the law of the average Joe in the auction house. So you could be doing something as simple as doing dead mines runs for like wool cloth or some shit like that, and you're able to get something like you're able to get like 20 stacks of wool cloth an hour or some shit like that, right? Well, when you go to the auction, assuming that there's a demand for your whatever the fuck it is you're trying to do. If there's no demand, then you're wasting your time, right? But assuming that there's a demand on the server for your wool cloth, how much money are we going to be expecting to get an hour of our time farming wool cloth as effectively as we possibly can compared to anything else anybody could have been spending their hour on? The answer is you're going to get about 100 gold for your stacks of wool cloth that you spend an hour farming, assuming that there's a demand for it. Because the law of the average Joe is the law of the auction house pricing. You are going to be trading 1 hour of your time doing whatever the fuck for 1 hour of the average Joe's time doing whatever the fuck, right? Being him farming gold, or being him doing Diurnal East jump runs, or him farming herbs, or whatever the fuck, right? So when you're able to find a raw gold farm, like a raw gold farm, like the ZG, which was pumping out like 300 gold an hour, or boosting for like 300 gold an hour, when you go to the auction house now, the law of the average Joe is in your favor. You're able to trade 1 hour of your time for 3 hours of the average Joe's time. So now you're able, like if they were getting 2 Arcanite crystals an hour, you could trade 300 of one of your hour of time for 6 Arcanite crystals, right? Because your buying power, your hourly trade buying power has increased by however much you're outperforming the average Joe. If you're following that with me at all. This does theoretically allow botters to play the auction house to try to form monopolies. So, for example, if they have an army of bots farming like 300 gold an hour in ZG, and then they turn around and they try to corner the market on, say, Arcanite crystals, right? Because they're buying them up at a 3 times ratio. The problem with that is the market simply adjusts and the botting community adjusts, right? So the next thing you know, it becomes like Arcanite crystal prices, they're not 55 gold anymore. They're like 65 or 70 gold all of a sudden. Well, now the player base is like, well, shit, let me stop doing whatever the fuck I'm doing and go start doing jump runs. And even the botting community is like, well, shit, let me go start doing jump runs. Someone's trying to form a monopoly. So the market rapidly adjusts to try to get a better than the average Joe amount of gold per hour doing Diurnal East jump runs, for example. And the next thing you know, your attempt at forming a monopoly on the auction house just simply doesn't work. Where it would work, because there's no instant content, would be Lotus farm, right? So you could buy up lotuses super cheap, like, hoard them for like Nex Ramus and so forth and so on. Then, but that's more of a, you're able to do that because there's no instanced content for that particular type of herb. But you're also in competition with the community and the botters. So if the botters start noticing that something like this is going on, they'll start dedicating a lot more of their army of bots They'll transition their army of bots over from the raw gold farms to start looking for Black Lotus spawns, for example. So it's really hard to generate a monopoly on that, and it's less subject to the monopoly's whims than it is to the laws of supply and demand, if that makes any sense. So, for example, there are two major factors that are driving up the prices of Black Lotuses in Naxxramas as opposed to AQ40. And that is that demand has increased exponentially since Naxxramas came out, and supply has stayed stagnant. Right? The supply is the same. The server on Faralina produces the same amount of Black Lotuses every hour that it's produced since the beginning of time, right? And suddenly the demand on the Black Lotus has doubled. Therefore, the pricing will naturally double. If the demand had tripled, then the pricing would triple. It's just the way it is. But then the botters, adjust, and maybe there's an army of botters out there. They're subject to the law of competition. It's just really, really hard for them to break the laws of the auction house. The botters, if that makes any sense. Okay. So, what are my predictions for Classic World of Warcraft? Knowing what I know about economics and how it plays out in TBC, in Classic World of Warcraft, and then TBC, and so forth and so on, and blah 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 blah. Bots are actually a good thing and a bad thing for video games, and it depends on a number of factors. So, for example, I played a lot of Diablo 2, right? And Diablo 2 is always online, has always been known to have a botting infestation. Okay, it's got a serious botting problem in Diablo 2. And every now and then, but generally it's not a massive online multiplayer game. It's more of a PvE game. So the community has come to the conclusion in Diablo 2 that the bots are good for the Diablo 2 community because what happens is, and we notice this, every once in a while Blizzard gets up off their ass and finds a way to completely obliterate the bots from Diablo 2. And you might think it's like, hooray, there's not an army of bots now on Diablo 2 anymore. This ought to be awesome. And it's awesome for a little while until you realize that the economy is completely fucked. And the reason why not having an army of bots, like an army of literal slaves running around the world picking up all the resources for you, is really bad in Diablo 2 is because in Diablo 2, I want this to go away. All right. So in Diablo 2, you might have to spend like 60 hours to get like 60 hours of just grinding mobs into oblivion might equal like one high rune. Okay. And you might need 10 high runes. You literally need you might need like 10 high runes in order to max to get your character like in the best possible gear, practically, or even more actually. But it might take you like 600 hours of gameplay time to fully finalize your character in Diablo 2, right? That's if bots did not exist, right? So every 600 hours of mindless grinding and playing in Diablo 2 will generate you like a free character. Or you could go and spend like an hour of how do I put this? Or you could go work your job for like 2 hours, get some real world currency, pay a guy real world currency in exchange for this. All right, let me pause the video and actually bring this up in case it does something weird. Okay. So I'm going over to the website Go Godly right now. This is the website that I primarily buy all my Diablo 2 stuff from. When I do go and buy Diablo 2, I usually play on the US West ladder. And let's go look at rune prices currently for the US ladder. Now this is the closer they get to the season ending, the cheaper these prices become. These prices are telling me that the season isn't quite over, but it'll probably end in like 3 months or so. So you can see here that these are all high runes. Anything that's going for a fraction of $1 in a price is a high rune. So what like a goal here is a pretty popular high rune. Malls are cheaper. Ists are cheaper. Where is the rune pack for like any? I guess they're not selling rune packs quite yet. 20 is, 10 is, Zods. Jaws and Burrs are really popular. These are probably the most expensive. Okay, so what we're basically seeing here, Jaws, is, Zods, good stuff. So what botting basically does for the Diablo 2 community is, rather than me okay, so if it was just a bunch of human beings, how do I put this? It's like, if it's just a bunch of us humans playing Diablo 2, we have to put every 60 hours, we're going to get ourselves a high rune. And then what we also have to do, but it's not quite that bad, it's like maybe every 60 hours we get like an item that we can trade with other human beings for a high rune, or we actually find an actual high rune, right? Like that's typically how it works in Diablo 2. So I can either spend something like 300 hours and a bunch of trading time with other human beings, if those human beings actually even exist online to trade to, and I can have a fully geared out character. 300 hours of my life playing Diablo 2. Or I can go work like a minimum wage job for like 2 hours and easily buy like 10 high runes. Like they're trying to tell me that 10 high runes here is going to cost me like $5, right? And then I might need some extra bits of gear, so I might get like 15 high runes, and I'll go online and I'll trade my extra 5 high runes to for other people for other, like the base items that I need to put the high runes in, and so forth and so on. The botting really helps the Diablo 2 community because we don't want to play the game for 300 plus fucking hours to finalize a character. We'd rather just spend real world money on the bots and get our finalized characters that way, if that makes any sense. But it's not a massive online multiplayer Diablo 2, so it's a completely different environment. So I was very interested to see like how the bots would affect the community, positive or negatively, compared to Diablo 2. So in Diablo 2, if you watch any videos on the subject of the bots, the Diablo 2 community basically agrees that the botters are good for the community because it keeps prices cheap. Because we basically have, for every one player that exists, there are 10 bot slaves running around farming for me, if that makes any sense, right? And it's not a competitive game like Classic World of Warcraft. So in Classic World of Warcraft, how botting works, in my opinion, is this, right? One of two things is happening. So Blizzard, in their infinite wisdom, has dumped us off they're because they're cheap bastards. They're cramming like 25,000, 20,000, 30,000 of us on a server full of resources designed to handle maybe 5,000 people. Like on private servers, you might have like 5,000 people active at any given point in time on like a bustling private server. But even on private servers, they're trying to cram like 20,000 people into a server designed to handle, with resources designed to handle, 5,000 people, like double what the maximum server size is, right? So the only thing keeping the economies afloat in Classic World of Warcraft, to be perfectly honest with you, is instanced content that actually has the resources we need. This is why I brought up the thorium ore problem, right? Before Dire Maul East comes out on private servers, thorium ore is hard to get your hands on. But at any point in time, there's only like 5,000 people you're competing with on the server to get your hands on thorium ore on private servers until I think it's Phase 2 comes out, and then Dire Maul East is out, or some shit like that. But in Classic World of Warcraft, it's not 5,000 people at any time that I'm competing against. I might be competing against 15 or 20 or 25 or 30,000 fucking people on my server for these goddamn for these resources that are non-instanced resources. Another example of non-instanced resources that they used to be instanced, but they're not instanced very much anymore, is god damn it, what the fuck is it? Elemental Earth, right? So Elemental Earth used to be that you could go and do a farm in Maradon for infinite amounts of Elemental Earth, and thank God for that. Or otherwise, you had to go out to like the Badlands and pick on the Earth elementals out there. What saves the private server, or what saves Classic WoW from not having an issue with elemental Earth farming, being a very scarce commodity, is the fact that it's a quest. The lower level ones are a quest mob, and therefore they have dynamic respawns. So the more people that are farming them, the more they respawn, kind of a thing. So it's kind of like instant content out there, and thank God for that. So what I'm trying to tell you basically is that if they're going to cram 50,000 of us on one fucking server, and then the only problem with that is if there isn't any instance content for us to go and greatly expand, if the server feels the need to greatly expand the quantity of a certain material that is available to us, if that makes any sense, right? Another example would be the Black Lotuses. There's no instance content where we can get Black Lotus. Therefore, if the demand for Black Lotus goes up, if the demand for Black Lotus doubles, then the price of Black Lotus is going to double on the auction house, and there's not a goddamn thing we can do about it because there's no instance content where both the army of botters, the botters again, they're making raw gold. They're not really interested in dicking around with the issues with the average Joe on the auction house. They're trying to avoid that problem. But they will make micro adjustments if, like, suddenly a patch comes out and like arcane crystals are in a super high demand. Like they'll switch over their bots to go farm arcane crystals for a time because they're getting a good, better than the average Joe trade. But once the player community adjusts, and they start doing Diurnal East runs, and then the market economy goes back down to the law of the average Joe, then they'll go back to their normal gold farming routines. So this brings us up to whatever the fuck Staysafe in his infinite retardation about economics is proposing is going to be a problem in TBC. So this is a one example Shadow Cloth, and it's costing, I think this is a primal Shadow, and then this is like a primal Fire. All right. So. If there is no instance content for any of the for these materials, keep in mind this is just an example. They're going to be making primal moon cloths, primal spell cloths, and then I don't know what the shadow cloth, right? And all this stuff is going to cost different types of material. I don't know what the hell this costs, or what the hell this costs, to be perfectly honest with you. If there is instance content to support an expansion of the materials required for these materials over here, then it will be from a server material consumption perspective viable to support an army of people making this crap right here. Okay, it's going to be viable. If there is not instance content for you to get these materials that they're proposing, that this theoretical army of bots is, or it's not an army of bots, it's an army of players, right? Paying for multiple accounts. This army of multiple accounters with their level boosts. Then this is just not going to be a thing because the server just does not have the material to support an army of these multiple accounters making this crap, and they're certainly they're certainly going to have an issue with demand on the back end, right? So let's say that 10,000 people on your server out of 30,000 people decide that they're going to try to do the Shadow Cloth. So problem number one is you might run into a resource issue, okay? And if you don't run into a resource issue, you're going to run into a supply and demand issue. Because if there's like 10,000 people who are all in on the Primal Cloth, Spell Cloth, and Shadow Cloth, but there's only like 30,000 people on your server, they're very rapidly not going to need Primal Cloth, Spell Cloth, or Shadow Cloth anymore because the market is absolutely flooded with Primal Cloth and then Shadow Cloth and then Moon Cloth, Primal Cloth, Spell Cloth, and Shadow Cloth. And so you're just not getting the return on your investment, and you're going to be rapidly, very, very rapidly subject to the law of the average Joe. What's worse is the demand for Primal Mooncloth, Spellcloth, and Shadowcloth will absolutely crash because the market is being flooded with it, which means in conjunction, the demand for the whatever materials are going into the Shadowcloth and the Fellcloth is actually going to crash as well. Because nobody needs it for that purposes, which means the army of bots isn't farming it, and then the army of average Joes aren't farming these materials, which means you're going to run into issues. Keep in mind, on Classic World of Warcraft, I have a metric shit ton of alts that specialize in Arcanite bars and Arcanite bar manufacturing and Mooncloth manufacturing. And I've seen the markets go up and down as demand goes up and down and so forth and so on. These are not consumable demands, right? Like this, you're not making bandages out of your Primal Mooncloth or your Spellcloth or your Shadowcloth. You're making gear. So once everybody has the gear, the demand is going to absolutely fucking tank. So yeah, go ahead. Purchase multiple accounts to try to get in on this market. You're a fucking retard if you think it's going to generate you gold for anything outside of phase 1. But I guess you can... I don't know, man. I just don't think it's going to be a thing. So, why are bots good for World of Warcraft economy? Like, I made that statement. It lets Blizzard get away with cramming us all on one server. If that makes any sense. It lets Blizzard get away with cramming us all on one server because... any resource that the player base is demanding in high quantity at any point in time, as long as there's instanced content where that resource can be generated, we're always going to simultaneously have an army of bots farming the herb nodes around the clock that the player base is demanding so that they can work the auction house and make as much gold as possible. We're always going to have an army of bots that if the demand for an instance content material like Arcanite crystals or some kind of herb or primal this or primal that gets too out of control, like the server can no longer generate enough of this resource that the player base is demanding, we have this army of bots, this army of slave labor that can just dive into the instance for us and make these materials en masse for us on the hour, every hour. And then our auction houses will be flooded with this material. It'll be subject to the law of the average Joe. And how do I put this? If you put 50,000 people on Faralina server and then told the bots to go fuck themselves, what would happen to the economy? Right? Like, you just like, okay, we're going to shove 50,000 players on Faralina, and then we're going to tell the bots that they can't exist. There's no botting. All right, well, what happens to the economy? And the answer is that prices become rather exorbitant really quickly. Your Arcanite crystals on Faralina would not be a 55 gold a pop. They would be closer to like 65 gold a pop. Because there's no botting competition to stop the player base from demanding that they break just a little bit, just by like 20% margin, the law of the average Joe on the auction house, if that makes any sense. It does mean that you can get better gold farms, but it kind of hurts the player base in the long run. Your Black Lotuses would actually be more expensive, not less expensive, which is kind of fascinating if you think about it, because that's a content that cannot be instanced. So at least right now we have an army of bots running around farming the Black Lotuses at like probably like a 98% efficiency. So the moment a Black Lotus is spawned, there's probably less than like 20 seconds before it's been collected by a bot, which is actually a healthy thing for the server, which is really weird to think about, but it is. Like, you might be angry as a player that your Black Lotus farm plans are being absolutely obliterated by Black Lotuses, but everybody else, it's kind of a good. We got bots farming Elemental Earth as efficiently as it can be possibly farmed on the server. We got bots farming Elemental Fires as efficiently as they possibly can be farmed on the server. Outside of instant content. If the player base starts demanding really high amounts of a certain thing, not only will the player base start farming it in the instance content, but the bots will start going after it in the instance content, and it's kind of a scenario of like, thank God for that, because it means that Bots are producers, not consumers in classic World of Warcraft. Like, let me put it to you that way, right? So what a bot is they are a player. Think of them like a player that all they're doing is they're going around and they're producing something. But they're not really consuming anything. They're not going to raids. They're not using potions. They're not using any of these items out in the world that they're theoretically farming up and putting on the auction house for us. So they're not a consumer. They're just a generator. So think of it like every 10 bots is worth, how do I put this? The bots are probably worth, on like Faralina, another layer or two worth of resources for just about any instance-based resource that can drop. Because they're not going to vendor it. They might as well put it on the auction house and get the average Joe price for it, right? Which means, and since they're not a consumer, they're not taking away from the economy, they're just adding to the economy constantly. So in that sense, that they're good for the economy. They allow 50,000 people to actually kind of survive and live with all of their consumable needs in raids on what is essentially a fucking... a very limited resource server, because you'll end up having like 50,000 players, but then if you factor in like the army of bots, there might be like, 100,000 bots and like 50,000 players or some shit like that. Or more accurately, there's like 20,000 of the 50,000 players are actual players, and then 30,000 of them are bots. But the bots are producers, not consumers, and therefore it really helps out. Where it starts to hurt things specifically is like things like GDKP runs, right? Because that's the only real environment where gold buyers can really flex. The only other place I could see it really hurting the environment would be what the fuck is it? I see it hurting the environment like if you're in a shitty guild that is subject to bribes, right? Like, oh, it's a loot council, but it's a loot council that's subject to being bribed, right? In that case, the botters are not helping that because they're putting in a metric shit ton of gold per hour, if that makes any sense. So they greatly inflate. So the bots are doing two things. They're greatly inflating the amount of gold that is available on a server, but they're not really affecting auction house prices because the auction house price is always subject to... auction house prices is subject simultaneously to the laws of supply and demand, and it's subject to the law of the average Joe, if that makes any sense, okay? So it's like, think of it this way. So let's say I'm a gold buyer, right? I'm like a whale or some shit. And at any point in time on my character, I've got like over 1 million gold. Like I just have 1 million gold on my character. How much damage can I actually do to the game? Well, can I try to go use my real world money, my 1 million gold to try to corner a market on something, right? And the answer is not really, because the only markets I can really corner would be markets that have non-instanced content-based items. Because if I try to corner a market on an instant contentable-based item, then the army of bots and the army of the players will immediately jump all over that because I'm affecting the supply and demand. And the supply is theoretically infinite. The demand is finite. And so it doesn't help me if I try to go up and buy up all the Arcanite crystals and then try to make a monopoly on Arcanite crystals, because the market will simply adjust from the instant content. The only place I can really do it is in items that are not instantly contented, and those are very few and far between. The point is, the problem with a monopoly manifestation in classic World of Warcraft is more to do with the fact that the resource is not being there's a limitation on the resource, and there's a high demand for it. Otherwise, if there was no limitation on the resource generation, the market would just adjust, right? The player base would adjust, the botters would adjust, and they would just produce more of the stuff because it's in a higher demand. You can see this very specifically with Blizzard's fix to the Devil's Sword Leather problem. They just changed the respawn rate to be like 5 minutes on each Devil's Sword, and the Mafia was just crushed. instantly, right? Because they can't. They fixed it with a resource generation solution, not so much a botting issue. This is also why you don't see an army of bots trying to corner the market on Devil's Sore Leather out in Unguro Crater, because it's too late for that now. Supply and demand, blah 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 blah. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the bots are a good thing, in the sense that if there's any resource that the community decides that it needs very, very badly on a server, and that resource can be farmed or can be expedited infinitely via instance content, right? Like if we suddenly decide that we need like shadow protection potions. That shadow protection potions are a really good example in Classic World of Warcraft. So there's not a lot of instances in Classic World of Warcraft that you can go into and pick up the materials for a shadow protection potion, and there are very few spawn points for the grave moss in the world in general. A lot of my alts, I transitioned a lot of my alts from being mooncloth farmers to being herbalists, and rather than being alchemist, I went grave moss farming, is what I'm trying to tell you. When the market price went up for grave moss out in the world, and I would camp them on their rotation frequency and so forth and so on. So in Naxxramas, I imagine there's a large increase in the demand for shadow protection potions, and there's not a lot of instant content that you can do to really get grave moss, if that makes any sense. But there is instant content that exists that allows you to get grave moss, which means that even if the demand for grave moss went into infinity, an army of bots can literally keep the price down on the auction house significantly by just transitioning over to botting up a bunch of grave moss. You're going to be paying a little bit more than the average Joe per hour, right? So you might be paying like 150 gold for like an hour and a half of your time for 1 hour of the botter's time, kind of a thing, or 1 hour of the player's base thing. But the market, the economy can adjust because you can produce more from the instant content, if that makes sense. And what the botters are doing for us in Classic World of Warcraft is they're producers and they're not consumers, right? So when they go do their gold farms, they invariably, because they're not interested in the bots are not interested in working the auction house and being subject to the laws of the average Joe. What they want is they go do like Strata Undead, for example, or they find the most efficient raw gold farm per hour for their bots, and they just sit on that into infinity. But during the process of sitting on that into infinity, they just kind of generate some stuff that ends up going on the auction house anyways. And in doing so, they keep the prices down, and they're producers, not consumers. And it's very nice to have like 2/3 of your population on your server being producers, not consumers. It just means that you have more materials to go into raid with. It keeps the prices down, and so forth and so on. Where it sucks, of course, is that they're theoretically flooding the gold, the market with metric shit tons of gold. But then I try to ask myself, where exactly does having metric shit tons of gold benefit you? So, like I was saying, like let's say I go and I spend enough money to get like 1 million gold in Classic World of Warcraft. I just have 1 million gold now as a player. What can I do with 1 million gold? Well, I don't have to worry about consumables and raids anymore. I can gear out my character much easier and much quicker through GDKP runs, right? My gold through GDKP runs will flow out of me and into the rest of the community. So now the rest of the community just ends up having metric shit tons of gold, right? And you have to ask yourself, what does that do to the market? And when I look at that, it's kind of like, how to explain? You have to ask yourself, at what point does everybody in classic World of Warcraft just have so much gold that the law of the average Joe starts to break down. Like the auction house is no longer subject to the law of the average Joe, and it starts being subject to the law of the average Joe being like, how much gold per hour can the average Joe make? I cannot ask the average Joe to pay more than an hour of his time for like an hour of my time. And if the number one way to make gold in classic World of Warcraft shifts from just making raw gold an hour to doing GDKP runs, then that will be the law of the average Joe, is how I look at it, right? So if people stop trying to make gold from just open world gold farming, so if I make 100, if the average Joe can no longer make, is now making say 300 gold an hour from a GDKP run, whereas before they were making 100 gold per hour from not a GDKP run, then the market will shift, right? And your 2 Arcanite crystals that you're getting per jump run, you're subject to now a 300 gold per hour GDKP meta. And so your 2 Arcanite crystals are going to be selling for about 160 gold a pop, right? Or maybe like 165 gold a pop factoring in taxes, because the law of the average Joe is now centered around how much gold can the average Joe make in a GDKP. Off of all of the gold farmers, if that makes any sense. So you'll see the prices go up, but the community will just shift. And the community will shift in the sense that I don't have to buy gold under those market conditions. I don't have to. I just have to not be a shitter and be able to do GDKP runs for people, right? I just have to be able to carry people, and I don't have to buy gold. So you might be in a situation where it's like 30% of the player community has to buy gold because they suck that bad. They just can't do GDKPs. Or just can't do GDKPs. Or the player base, either you have to do GDKPs or you have to buy gold, would be kind of the moral of the story. And what's causing that, of course, would be your botting epidemic, right? Your botting. The botters are producers, not consumers. One of the things that they're producing is massive shit tons of raw gold. People will go and buy the gold. They will then hand over the gold in exchange for items to the player base in GDKPs. This will greatly inflate the amount of gold per hour that your average Joe is making. Therefore, the market adjusts. And basically, the only way you can now make gold in Classic World... well, it's not even true, right? It doesn't even change the way you make gold in Classic World of Warcraft. So now my option in Classic World of Warcraft is I can either go do GDKP for 300 gold an hour, or I can go do Dire Maul East jump runs, or the equivalent thereof in Burning Crusade, and then just trade on the auction house for 300 gold an hour, because that's what the average Joe is making. So even under these conditions, it doesn't really hurt anything, other than the fact that it allows certain people to spend real-world currency to go into a GDKP and then to farm and to get basically boosted, right? To get a better deal on their items. But to be perfectly honest, the rest of us are just sitting in a guild, right? And we're sitting in a good guild. And our thought process is, well, we can either go, do Dire Maul East jump runs and get average gold an hour, or we can go do GDKP runs and then get even more gold an hour for a little while. And we'll probably be doing some GDKP. We'll probably be doing some open world farming and trading on the auction house for average Joe. And on top of that, we'll be raiding with the guild, at the premium content level. And GDKP isn't a thing in a good guild, right? Like, I can't bribe my loot council or my boys because, first off, we don't really need the gold a lot of the time. And second off, your guild will die a horrible death very quickly if it's found out that people are bribing other people with gold. You're just in a bad guild. You got to get out of that guild. So it's kind of like the botting so-called epidemic, or the printing gold epidemic is literally all in your head. But here's where that's where the economist in me comes in. That's where the theoretical economist in me comes in. Like I can actually see the effects of it on classic World of Warcraft, and you're just deluding yourself if you think that this is going to have a severe negative effect on the economy. You'll notice that the prices are going up on your server, but then you'll also be noticing that, well, shit, I can do Dire Beast jump runs now for 300 gold an hour. What the fuck? But then, you're turning around and trying to sell that hour of farm time for somebody else's hour of farm time, and you're discovering that you're paying 300 gold an hour. So nothing has changed. Okay? 1 hour of your farm time is still worth 1 hour of anybody else's farm time, whether they're doing GDKPs or they're not doing GDKPs, because that is just the law of the land in economics in fucking video games, if that makes sense. Well, 1 hour of your farm time is worth 1 hour of the average Joe farm time, and the only way for you to increase your farm time power is to find a way to make more gold per hour than the average Joe's farm time. One of the ways to do that, theoretically, is to buy gold online, right? But if GDKPs start becoming a thing, GDKP, yeah. So, but if GDKP starts becoming a thing, like starts becoming popular, it breaks that entire cycle. So before GDKPs existed, what you could effectively do as a gold buyer is, rather than spending 10 hours of time farming gold and trading at the average Joe in the auction house, you can now just spend real world money to like double your gold per hour or triple your gold per hour. So then you could go to the market and outperform the average Joe, if that makes any sense. However, with the advent of GDKPs, the gold is flowing in exchange for gear, right? So real world currency changing for the botters, which then we go into GDKP, which means the gold eventually gets transferred to the players. The players spend the GDKP on the auction house. This fluctuates the auction house prices significantly, but it does not change the fact that you're still trading 1 hour of your farm time for 1 hour of the average Joe's farm time. All it means is that 1 hour of the average Joe's farm time is now worth 300 gold, up from 100 gold due to the bots and GDKP. But it doesn't change the fact that you can go kill sandworms out in Silithus and make the food item out of it, and then sell it on the auction house, and it's still going to be 1 hour of your time for 1 hour of their time. In real world market economics, this 1 hour of my labor exchange for 1 hour of your labor exchange exists, but it's a little bit more nuanced, because not everyone can do like Dire East jump runs in the real world. You might be doing the equivalent of working at McDonald's, which the World of Warcraft equivalent of working at McDonald's would be you're farming fucking dead mines for like whatever the fuck you can get out of dead mines per hour. So your hour of labor time is not worth the same as a Dire East jump run labor's time. And this is why real world economics, one of the main reasons why real world economics differs from online or from digital space economics, if that makes any sense. But digital space economics, you can go look at anything. You can go look at EVE Online. You can go look at Diablo 2's economy. You can go look at World of Warcraft's economy, both when there are bots, when there are not bots. So, for example, if you go over to the private servers where they're absolutely psychotic about killing bots. Let me make sure I'm still recording here and I'm not talking into the void. My internet went down. That's kind of nice. So on the private server where there is no army of bots, the law of the land still is how much gold is the average Joe making per hour. When I interact with the auction house, this is exactly how what the metrics will be. I might be able to squeeze out a little bit more gold than the average Joe is making per hour on the auction house, but it's probably going to be less than 10%. Like that's just the way it is. The only way to get truly ahead of people on the auction house is to find a way to make more gold per hour than the average Joe. Because then you can go and sell for to the average Joe at a 1-to-1 ratio, but you're really doing better, right? Like, again, back to our mage, like the whole ZG mage. So if there's a mage who's got the skills and the ability and the gear to make 300 gold an hour in ZG, he can then go to the auction house and trade. He's making 3 times X. There we go. He's making 3 times the amount of gold per hour doing that farm than the average Joe. Oh, I just realized something that's kind of interesting. One thing that the GDKP does, now that I'm thinking about it, or that bot farmers are doing to themselves, is they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. And I like this. I didn't notice this before, but now I'm noticing this. You'd think I would have this stuff sorted out, but I'm still trying to figure it out. All right, like I'm an economist, so I actually watch what goes on in World of Warcraft from an economic perspective, because it fascinates me, right? And let's say the bots are getting by on 150 gold an hour. So they're making 150 gold an hour doing their botting thing, and the average Joe is making like 100 gold an hour doing his thing, and so they have an advantage over the average Joe on the auction house. Now they're making raw gold. They're not farming materials and trying to like be more efficient at farming materials than other human beings. They're just trying to make raw gold. Well, what happens when the GDKPs pump that number up to like 3 times X? Right? Law of average Joe is now going up 3 times X on the auction house. So rather than the average Joe's payday being 100 gold an hour, now it's 300 gold an hour. So if I do Dire Mall East jump runs for raw gold, like let's say I do Maradon runs at 150 gold an hour for raw gold. Well, now I'm getting half the effect of the law of the average Joe, which means as a botter, I'm really hurting. Right, like I'm super hurting in that. So that makes that a non-viable farm. It is now a non-viable farm, and I guess this is kind of bad for players as well. So your raw gold an hour viable farm of like 150 gold an hour viable farm was perfectly viable at a 100 gold per hour average Joe, but now it is super non-viable at a 300 gold per hour average Joe market economy. However, you can still go and do anything that was producing raw resources, right? Like you're not, so rather than being a raw gold farmer, you're now a resource provider that the community needs. So you can go make those arcane crystals, you can go make those fell cloths, you can go make that sandworm meat per hour, you can go farm that grave moss, you can go do whatever the hell it is. So you have to switch from a raw gold farm to an actual like item farm, if that makes any sense. Because of all the gold that is now infesting the system, which is probably a good thing. It's probably a lot healthier and a lot funner for the player base to be doing not a raw gold farm, but an actual item gold farm and then working the auction house. So in a sense, the bots are going to be shooting themselves in the foot with the invention of the GDKP. And the reason why they're shooting themselves in the foot is because they're going to have to switch over to instant-based farms that are producing raw resources, and then they're going to work the economy, right? Which means they're going to be subject to the laws of market demand, and it's gonna benefit the player base a lot, and it's gonna really hurt the botting, if that makes any sense. Because an average human player is perfectly fine competing with a botter on an even playing field, right? Like if the botter is producing 2 Arcanite crystals an hour, and I'm going and I'm producing 2 Arcanite crystals an hour, and then we're going and we're selling on the auction house for 300 gold for however many Arcanite crystals that we're generating, we're perfectly happy to go and compete with each other on those lines. I'm not bemoaning the fact that I could be selling for more if these botters didn't exist. I mean, you might be, but you'd be kind of you wouldn't have an economic mindset on it, because the moment you turn around and you try to buy anything off the auction house, again, the bots are producers, they're not consumers, right? And you could argue to me that the fact that they're producing raw gold is bad. Like my argument for the fact that they're producing resources and not consuming resources like grave moss and like arcane crystals is good. Like, if they're going to jam 50,000 of us onto a single fucking server, Thank God for the army of bots that's feeding us herbs and shit like that, right? And not taking it out of the economy. Like, thank God that that exists. Because the situation would be, if they didn't exist, you could make more money on the auction house, right? Like more raw gold in the auction house, but then prices would be more expensive, and you'd still be trading 1 hour of your time for 1 hour of their time, except you're only able to produce 1 hour of your time is only making like 2 stacks of herbs, whereas with the army of bots around, 1 hour of your time is making like 3 or 4 stacks of herbs, because they're producers, not consumers, and thank God for that. The GDKPs are going to switch the bots over from being forced to do, or from doing gold per hour, which you could make an argument that the gold per hour has knock-on effects, right? You can't argue with me that them producing lots and lots of herbs and lots of arcane crystals hurts the economy, because as a player we can just go sit on a gold per hour farm, and then we're getting more raw resources per hour for our hour exchange than we would get if the bots didn't exist. You could argue with me that when they're farming raw gold, that has negative knock-on effects. But some of the negative knock-on effects are going to be for the botters, that they're going to be forced to stop doing raw gold per hour farms and start getting in on the market. Because suddenly they can't do a 200 gold per hour raw gold farm, because they've flooded the market, flooded the server with so much gold that the average hour, the average Joe's is now 300 gold per hour working the auction house, right? So the average Joe goes out. We can't do raw gold farms anymore. Hell, the average Joe can't do a raw gold farm anymore. The average Joe has to go out and actually manifest some resources. And then he has to go to the auction house and he has to trade his hour of time manifesting resources for the other average Joe's time of manifesting resources, which means 300 gold per hour, right? The bots are going to have to compensate, which means the bots are going to be, rather than producing raw gold, they're going to be producing motes of shadow, motes of fire, motes of this, most of that. And so if we're going to be happy to have an army of bots working for us in TBC, because Blizzard is going to want to jam 30,000 of us on one fucking server because they're cheap bastards, which means that's going to be really hard for us to get all the resources that we need, because there's 30,000 of us running around on a goddamn server. And thank God, 2/3 of the population are bots. We never see them. They just keep coming out of instances over and over and over again. And they're just flooding the market with just materials, if that makes any sense. So it's like flooding the market with materials. At the end of the day, what you have to realize in economics is that gold doesn't matter, money doesn't matter, right? The dollar bill doesn't matter. The dollar bill has no value. The gold coin in World of Warcraft has no value. We're just using it as a means of exchange, right? So if I'm exchanging the amount of herbs I can farm in an hour for the amount of arcane crystals that you can farm in an hour, right? It doesn't matter whether or not that gold exchange, it doesn't matter whether or not we're spending 100 gold in that exchange or we're spending 1,000 gold in that exchange. All that really matters at the end of the day is that it's my hour of playtime being exchanged for your hour of playtime, and the only farm time, I should say, the only way to get ahead of that curve is to find a way to be more efficient at the farm than the average Joe. It's the only way. So, if our market is absolutely flooded with gold, which means that imagine arcane crystals are selling for 1,000 gold apiece in TBC, right? In TBC, I'm not actually, if I do end up playing TBC, which right now I'm not planning to be perfectly honest with you, I have 500 gold to my name on my main, all right? I'm not planning on going up to 20,000 gold or anything like that, because I know how fucking economics works. I know that when I go into TBC, even if something like Motes of Shadow, or let's say Arcanite Crystals, because we're still in Classic World of Warcraft, let's say Arcane Crystals and TBC are selling for 1,000 gold apiece, and the market demand is really high for them, right? All I need to do in order to make money is I just need to find an instance content somewhere and just start farming arcane crystals. Because an hour of my time farming any resource in TBC is going to trade for an hour of other people's time farming gold or doing GDKPs. Right? Does that make sense? So I don't need to farm up 20,000 gold before I go into TBC. And then I walk into TBC and then all the prices are super out of whack, right? Like, oh, this item is like 1,000 gold and that item is like 1,000 gold. And it's like, oh, Palatime, you fucking fool. You didn't save up money for TBC. What I will literally do is I'll laugh at you and I will literally go walk into the nearest instance with a friend because I probably don't have the gold to solo it. And I'll be like, hey, aren't there like motes of shadow in like mana tombs or some shit like that? And Talrain will be like, yeah, there's motes of shadow in there. It's like, hey, let's go farm motes of shadow. And we'll go and we'll spend an hour farming motes of shadow. And then I'll come out and I'll trade like, you know, an hour of my time farming those motes of shadow for like 1,000 of your fucking gold. As opposed to doing classic World of Warcraft and doing like GDKPs or some shit like that and making like 200 gold an hour, right? Because I'm an economist and I know how this fucking works. Does that make sense to you? I don't need to save up 100,000 gold in classic World of Warcraft to go into TBC because however much the economy is inflated in TBC is not going to change the fact that an hour of my time farming a material is going to be worth an hour of your time doing whatever the fuck to get gold on the auction house. Am I making any sense here? So why the fuck would I spend 5 hours of my time to make 1,000 gold in classic World of Warcraft when I could just spend an hour in mana tombs and on the auction house make 1,000 gold? Am I making any sense here at all? Like in theory, you're accelerating. You'd only do that if you were like some weirdo try-hard person who really wanted to accelerate your gameplay on TBC. Like, you're going for parses, you're going for world first, like, you're up at the tippy top kind of a thing. Whereas, if you just are an economist and you have a brain, you're like, okay, well, even if Blizzard... Okay, let me literally put it to you this way, okay? Let's say, in conjunction with this 58 level boost, Blizzard gave the 58 level boost, like, 1,000,000 gold. Like, you get 1,000,000 gold on top of being level 58 to go into TBC, right? Wouldn't change the market economy at all. What it would really do was it would devalue all the gold that everybody else has made up until this point, and everyone would have a right to be pissed off. But if I had no gold whatsoever going into TBC, right, and the market economy was just stupidly fucking inflated, right, it wouldn't change the fact that me walking into mana tombs, farming motes for an hour, coming back out on and dropping it in the auction house, an hour of my farm time is going to be traded for an hour of your farm time. Which means I might make 1,000,000 gold in an hour in like a stupidly inflated economy just because. Am I making any fucking sense here? Okay, cool. Thank God. So, yeah. If you're a try-hard guild, you're going to want to farm up liquid gold before you go into TPC. If you're not a try-hard guild, don't even fucking worry about it. The market forces have got your back. Like, they literally have your back. You're just going to walk into TBC. You're going to be like, wow, I'm poor as hell. Everything on the auction house is expensive as fuck. Huh. At that point, there's no difference between me having 10,000 gold and me having, like, 500 gold. Right? Or we agreed on that. Which means that I'll just be like, okay, well, I guess I got to go farm gold in this current market economy. And I'm just going to go into mana tombs for an hour, and I'm going to walk out. I'm going to make, like, 600 gold an hour farming mana tombs. Mana tombs. There we go. With a few friends. No big deal. No big deal. I'll just plug myself into the market economy. The gold number attached to it literally does not matter because you're trading an hour of your time for an hour of other people's time. It could be 1,000,000 gold an hour. It could be 5 gold an hour. It literally doesn't matter. You're getting the average Joe price every time. So I'm literally an average Joe walking into mana tombs. I farm it for an hour of my time. I walk out. I go on the auction house. I trade it for somebody else's hour of time, and then boom, I'm up to like 10,000 gold within a few hours. But you fucking dumbasses farmed classic World of Warcraft thinking that somehow it's gonna matter in TBC. You're fucking retarded. Okay, but I'm an economist. I can't blame you for being weird, wackaloo on that, or not knowing what the hell. That'd be like that'd be like me making a video about, well, I am a game designer, so I do make videos about game design. That'd be like me making a video trying to tell you guys how to raid properly, even though I'm not a raider, so it's like, eh. Huh. Mm-hmm. Okay, so enjoy. That's basically the Market of Forces economy video. We're just going to upload this video now, and day is full, boys.